Hello, everyone. So, one question that people always ask me about is whether or not they should drop out. And I think there's a bunch of videos out there basically going over the same reasons why people should drop out. But in this video, I wanted to talk about something different. I want to talk about three reasons why you shouldn't drop out, and consequently, examples from my own life that make dropping out actually harder for your life. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, first and foremost, getting your first job is like infinitely harder, right? After you get that first job, I wouldn't say smooth sailing, but it's way smoother sailing. In order to get that first job, even with a degree, some people will find tremendous difficulty. So by not having a degree, it just adds in an additional complexity. The reason why that is because large companies and medium-sized companies too, they generally have this recruitment flow that is very specialized, very catered to new graduates, right? Take, for example, the company I work at right now, Snapchat, but basically every single major tech company does this. They have resources in order to go to colleges, go to job fairs, source candidates, put them through an internship program, all the way leading up to the interview, all these job fairs, all these on-sites and stuff like that. These programs are created specifically for new graduates and soon-to-be new graduates. Oftentimes, if you don't have a degree, you won't go through this basically specialized accelerated track for you. And then you'll be put in the bucket of just like any other junior engineer coming into the company. So your interviews are going to be harder, and you're going to be interviewing with people that are maybe 1 or 2 years into their career already. So it's going to be a little bit harder to kind of stand out. Basically, when you drop out of college, a lot of that safety net, those guide rails, the rope that's holding you up, sort of goes away, right? College is really good at providing you a path, and computer science programs that are top notch, they care about placement of their graduates, right? So they create a lot of additional resources for you to get your job. And for a lot of people, if you're in an in-demand industry, it's just like walking down a path. There's going to be some challenges, but that path is already predefined for you, right? You have to think about it like when you do choose, and if you do choose to drop out of college, you have to create your own path. And for many people, that is the first time ever where there is not this guide rail, right? Where there is not this path. And if you're not used to that, it can be incredibly daunting. And I've seen many people just completely collapse, right? It's like growing up, never ever having to cook a meal before, and then suddenly being expected to prepare like a 4-star dining experience, right? It goes from 0 to 100 very, very fast. I myself, through my experience, took several months in order to get my first job, right? I told this story before, but I applied to over 50 places and had over 14, 15 or so in-person interviews. And, frankly, because I didn't have a degree and go through my computer science program, a lot of my fundamentals weren't as good as some of these other folk. As much as people trash on college, you still learn something for sure. And these nuggets of knowledge are things that you're going to be asked about in interviews. And these other people had 2 or 3 more years of preparation than I did, right? So when I'm interviewing for jobs, on top of not going into this new grad fast track and then being placed against people with 1 or 2 years of experience, I also lacked solid CS fundamentals that I had to learn on my own before I was able to get a job. So yeah, for me, it took many more months, right? Maybe 3-4 months to get a job. But in general, how I kind of see it is that if college takes you 4 years, and let's say you drop out after 2 years and it takes you 6 months to find a job, you save a year and a half of your life. That is still a very substantial amount of time, a time that is worth infinite and something that you're never going to get back. So reason number two, why it would be hard and when it was hard for me, kind of segues from number one. It's kind of the same thing, but don't be fooled to think that no one cares about your degree. You hear about like Elon Musk doing his thing over there and saying like, oh, he hires like he doesn't care about people that have a degree or not, right? Cool, that's Elon Musk, but what about the rest of the world, right? The United States tech industry, it's a little bit more progressive, but if you're trying to find a tech job in like Europe, they tend to be a little bit more conservative. Many of them, from my experience, they do look for that degree. So it really is geographic dependent, right? And then we're talking about large tech companies, right? But how about mid-tier companies or like smaller companies that are more conservative or companies that are not in tech hubs? Some of those might look for degrees as well, right? And then it compounds together because if only the large tech companies don't care about your degree, those are the tech companies that are going to grill you the hardest in terms of their interview process and the requirements because they are the top tier tech company, right? And chances are, I mean, as I said before, if you don't have a degree, you probably missed in some schooling. So there are gaps that you need to fill within your knowledge. And because there are gaps, it's going to be harder to interview for Google, which means you might have to fall back onto like a more smaller, medium-sized business, right? My story is that after my first job, I actually interviewed at Google, right? So back in the day, it was like 10 years ago. They have this sort of interview process where they bring people on board and then they give them like a full day interview. And then essentially if you don't make it, then they'll like have points in which they kind of cut you, right? And I remember during the culture interview, right? It's usually the lunch interview, we were chatting, something like that. And I can't remember how exactly it came up, but we were talking about my education, my background, and they asked me about it. And they asked me if I had studied computer science, I think it was. And I said, no, I actually don't. And I don't actually have a degree. And they were like, oh, and they were kind of surprised. And then after that lunch interview, I was basically told that my interview ended there and they wouldn't be proceeding. Now, it could be for several things, right? It could be because I don't have a degree. It could be that I did completely horrible in the first few rounds, right? But it was still kind of strange that they cut me off at the lunch interview. And to be fair, like Google is a very academic kind of company, so they tend to care more about that than the average company. And this was also 10 years ago, right? And I've heard a lot has changed since then, but still, that was a personal experience for me where I was like, oh, dang, like I felt like I was crossed off the list just because I didn't have a piece of paper. Now, the third and last downside to not having a degree for me, which I think is actually the most important, is that college is not purely just for education in the traditional sense. One of the most beautiful things, and I think most valuable things out of college, is that it's the first time in one's life, generally, where they get to be away from their parents and get to learn about who they are. They get to be in an environment immersed with individuals all in the same boat, all learning about themselves and all learning about who they want to be and what they want to do, what they believe in, their values, right? And for me, I didn't really have that because, I dropped out when I was just like 19 years old. I didn't have this period where I can really explore myself, where I can just be like a young adult, where I can just do stupid things, where I can, learn about these things. And that definitely has an impact on you. Some of these things I had to learn later in my life, whereas, more people were more sure about the person that they are and who they wanted to become. I think it probably took me until like I was 25, 26 before like I took a pause and kind of went through this like soul searching experience, right? And for people that do drop out and don't have this experience, I'm afraid, honestly, for some that they might never have that. And then they don't develop like axioms for their lives, like principles, fundamental beliefs for their lives. I'm not saying that like college is like the only way to learn these things, but life is short, and it kind of goes hand in hand. I think if you're looking to drop out of college, you're probably a very ambitious person. You want to get things done fast and over with. Or maybe you just like hate education, you hate your professor or whatever, but I've just known a lot of people that drop out of college, go right into the workforce, and then just work for like 20 years before they realize, oh my God, like I never had my 20s. I have no idea how to follow it up after this, to be honest. I guess my advice to you, right, if you're watching this and you got to this part, is you got to stop and smell the roses sometimes. I know how cliche that sounds, but as frustrated as you might be with university, still, it wouldn't be an institution that exists if people didn't find some sort of value in it, right? You can't reject everything about university and say it's useless and then drop out, because that is short-sighted, and that's how you set yourself up for failure, right? You have to look at university, and you have to look at the actual parts that bring true value, and then you must substitute that. You must find a substitution for that in your life. Otherwise, you're going to be half a human, right? So yeah, figure out how to build like a network, because you're not going to have that not being in college, right? Figure out how to enjoy yourself. Figure out how to give yourself a environment in which you can learn about yourself and where you can grow, et cetera, et cetera. Like these things just cannot be forgotten. So anyways, kind of heavy, I guess. Got kind of heavy at the end unexpectedly, but you know what? Like, here we are. It's late, Welcome to the journey, I guess. Anyways, sorry for my rambling, but again, if you like the video, like it, subscribe, tell me more what I can tell you, and I'll try to drop as much knowledge as I can. And take care out there, and see ya.